Yes, sister in the back. Yes. It depends. We're going to get to that. That's on one of my slides. Yeah, yeah. Sister, what's this? Come on, good. Okay. So expiation or atonement means three things. I mean, the way you do that, I'm coming, but since, is that ill persons? Go to the next slide for a second, because it may be on the next one. Yeah. So that's coming. I'm going to answer your question, sister. It's coming now. So when does expiation do? When the fast is broken by intentional or deliberate intercourse, or when it's broken intentionally or deliberately by eating or drinking, according to some scholars, particularly the Hanafi and the Maliki, according to Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik. Okay, so what is the atonement? How do you atone if you intentionally break your fast? This is how you atone. Number one, and there's scholarly agreement, you find a slave and you free that slave. Yes, in 2011, we still have slavery. Oh, yes. Okay, yes, we do. So, I'm from Atlanta. There is a school in North Atlanta that I knew people that went to this school, and this school is a public school. They had a drive, a community drive, to free a group of slaves in Mauritania. And this public school, with these kids in this elementary school, freed 50 slaves. 50 from a public school. Deep. Yeah, they raised money, and they sent the money to the owners of the slave, and they bought their freedom, just like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. What a great charity. So don't read this stuff and be like, oh, that doesn't apply. Yes, it does. You just have to find it. So the first rule is find a slave and free the slave. It doesn't matter who that slave is. Their religion has no importance. Their gender is not important. If they're in slavery, then your job is to pay enough money to get them out of slavery. That's in all schools. That's in the Quran, actually. Yes.
This is kind of sort of a related question, but a little bit to the side. But if say you like steal a slave and then free them, is that wrong? Can you like steal a slave, like a young slave from somebody?
Can you do like Harriet Tubman, for example?
Yeah. Like, you know, whatever.
You still free the slaves, yes.
Yeah, like a young, like
yes,
somebody has a young person locked up, you know, you steal them. That's cool. All right, thanks, man. Great.
Yes. Yes.
Even if slavery is legal in that country?
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Why?
I'm going to tell
because,
you said it.
yeah, you can quote me. You know, don't quote me. You can quote me, and I'll debate anybody any day of the week on that. Because the Quranic theme is freeing slaves.
Okay.
This is just one aspect. If you slander a woman, right, you atone for that by freeing the slave. There's many other crimes that if you do them, the way to atone for them is freeing a slave. So there's so many avenues in the Quran for freeing a slave that there's no way possible to think that the Quran endorses it.
You can't do it wrong, basically.
You can't, no. It's like, okay, you've made a mistake, see that slave over there? That's your way out. That's your way out. So it's about slowly but surely getting rid of the institution of slavery, but not from a top-down approach, from a grassroots approach. Okay? Yes? Ooh, that's a good fatwa question. Is a prostitute, like sex slaves, for example?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's bondage. That's bondage any day of the week. I used to be a social worker, a caseworker, and used to work with sexual abuse cases. Sexual crimes, that's being in a bondage situation if there ever was one. Absolutely.
So in that case, could it be that you get, like, let's say it's a prostitute, get her some help, like get her counseling, get her on her road?
Freeing her, so this is the definition of freeing. Freeing means getting that person completely free from that institution and that situation, so that there is not a possibility that that person can ever be returned or return to that situation. So treatment may not be enough. Treatment might deal with the psychological effect, but it may not be enough to protect her from first of all, going back to that, because anybody who's worked with any teenage victims who are in this situation know that in some cases I don't want to get into another discussion, but it's just to answer your question. In some cases they admire their parents. In some cases they take care. They feel that they've been taken care of. Okay? So they may not see it as slavery. So you have to be careful in that situation. So help may not be the case. You may have to actually physically uproot them from that community in Southern California and put them somewhere in rural Montana somewhere. You see what I'm saying? Yes, sister. You're not being stabbed, are you?
Yeah. So they're asking if a sister does not wear hijab, is her fasting accepted?
Absolutely. Hijab has nothing to do with her fast. Absolutely. If a sister does not wear hijab, can she fast? Yes. Because the reason for that sister not wearing hijab could be tons of reasons. And the hijab, anyway, it's not a top-down thing. It's not an emir that goes from the top down. So, for example, the Islamic State could not legislate a hijab law. That would actually be illegal in Islam. Right? It has to come inwardly out. Right? So everybody's at different stages in their Islamic development, in their iman, and you never know what people's work situation is, their external situation is. You never know what kind of trauma they've been through. You never know if they have a hair condition that if they put fabric on their hair and they get an allergy. I mean, you just never know what people's situation is, so you should never judge that person. But to answer that question, it has nothing to do with fasting. Fast for 60 consecutive days. If you cannot free a slave or it's too much money, then you go to the second step. By the way, you don't get to choose this. This is not an option. You have to start with number one. And if you cannot do number one, then you go to number two. So you have to fast for 60 days. So after Ramadan is over, right after Eid, you start your fasting. And the fasting, according to all scholars, and it's mentioned in the Quran, it has to be for 60 consecutive days. You're not allowed to take a break. If you cannot do that because you're not healthy enough, or maybe you start off doing it and then it's too much beyond your burden, then you have to feed 60 people a meal, and that's actually a typo. 2 meals a day. And it has to be, according to some scholars, the same 60 people. Or it can be one person 2 meals a day for 60 days. Okay? And that's the way you atone for that sin. Yes, sister?
So how much is that for
So it's lunch and dinner, or dinner and breakfast, but it's not breakfast. It's lunch and dinner, or dinner, because why? Because some people just eat something light for breakfast. Right? Some people function just off coffee, so you can't give somebody coffee and I've atoned for my sins. It's $1 coffee, it's water. So no, it's got to be a meal. So in terms of dollar amount, it's around, between $10 to $15 per meal. Yeah, because it's a full meal. $10 to $15 per meal. So for a day, you're between $20 and $30 a day. My favorite subject in class when school was not math, so you add that up. There you go.
Is it equal to provide the money with the stated intention of them using that money for food, or
yes,
as giving them food?
Yes, you can.
Even if they don't use
yes,
that money.
you can give them money and say, here's your grocery bill for the next one person, for example, for the next 2 months.
They choose not to use it for food.
That's it. That's on them. Yes.
Are you free someone from financial slavery?
No. You can't write a check and pay their mortgage.
Women can't fast for 60 days.
Yeah. So then they would, unless they're menopausal or.
So is that not an option, that we can take a break and then resume, or is it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like when the woman has her menses. Yes. No. In that case, she has her menses. She doesn't fast, and then when she comes off her menses, she fasts. So for her, being on the menses is time-wise, it's like an Eid. It's like an Eid, but it's in terms of not fasting, because you can't fast on an Eid. So it's like you just had an Eid in the month. I mean, that's not really if I get myself in trouble. Strike two. What I need is a break from fasting. My wife just tells me, stop talking. Yes. I'm sorry, I really don't mean to. I hope that's not offensive. I really don't. I apologize. Really.
people can be a family member?
No,
Oh.
it has to be somebody outside the family.
Even
The
if
Prophet
people-
ﷺ did allow that for one person. A man came to him, he said, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, I've fallen into destruction." He said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I was with my wife. I had intercourse with my wife." And he said, "So free a slave." And the man said, "I have no money to free a slave." And then he said, "So fast 60 days. He said, "I can't bear that, it's too much for me." He said, "Sallallahu then feed 64 people." He said, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, there's no one in this city poorer than me. There's nobody more impoverished than me. If anybody deserves food, it's me." And the Prophet ﷺ laughed. And the Prophet ﷺ then took some fruit or a date or something, and he gave it to him. He said, "Feed your wife. Feed your wife." But no, not enough time you feed somebody else. That was an exception to the rule, an exceptional situation. In our time, we've got institutional protections in place for extremely impoverished family members, called food stamps, essentially. So they can, if a person can get food stamps, then they don't need to, or if they're getting food stamps, then there's an argument that can be made that you need to feed somebody else, because you're already feeding that person. Yes?
But that's only when you have your family here, but if you have your family in another country.
Okay, now that's different. If you have family in another country, yes, you can feed them. Very good question. Very good. Yes, absolutely. Very good question. Yes, brother.
Is this for every incident where you have to expiate for? Or is it just...
Sexual intercourse. Intentional, deliberate. Okay, and according to some scholars, according to some scholars, if you deliberately eat a drink, some scholars meaning that's the position of Imam Abu Hanifa. So if someone's following the Hanafi school, that's the position of Abu Hanifa. It's also the position of Imam Malik, to my knowledge, as well. It was like half of the four madhabs. Yes. So there's a sister. Yes, sister. Good question. So if a husband and wife have intercourse once in Ramadan, one day, right? Once. So then they do one atonement. If they have intercourse twice in that day, more than that, then you have some debate in Islam about what they should do. According to Abu Hanifa, if they have intercourse 10 times a day, they only expiate one time. All of those 10 get wrapped up and taken care of in this expiation. According to other scholars like Imam Shafi, they have to do 10 expiations. So when we talk about expiation, it's for one event in a day. But if the day is separate, so the husband and wife, they have relations on Monday during Ramadan intentionally, and then on Tuesday during Ramadan intentionally, and then Wednesday, for example, then because the day is separate, then in all scholarly opinions, there's 3 separate expiations. The difference of opinion is, what if you have multiple breakings of the fast in one day? That's where the difference is. Okay? I hope I explained that. Yes.
So, in the last time you talked about the ill being exempt.
Yes, the ill as well.
So-
Somebody in the hospital or...
So can you speak more on what
Yeah.
you find?
Illness means that you have an illness that renders you incapable of bearing the fast, or you're capable of bearing the fast, but you have to take medicine constantly throughout the day, and because you have to take medicine, then you can't fast. So that's what illness means. Okay? Not like I've got the flu, I've got sniffles or something like that. If a person does catch a virus or something, that could qualify, definitely. Especially if they're dehydrated, they've vomited, and they've got, dysentery, then yeah, they should break the fast and get looked at. Absolutely. Yes, sister, and then you go to the next slide. I'm sorry? No. For pregnant women, they feed one poor person per day that they missed. Yeah, that's what pregnant women do. So they feed them, one meal for every day they use.
Consider like $5 a meal for a homeless person?
Can you consider $5 a meal for a homeless person? Would you spend $5 on a meal yourself in New York City? No, but you're students. That doesn't count. I'll tell you now. I'm 36. I haven't eaten a meal for $5. Using mine $8, $9. I mean, okay, call me a big eater, but I don't know. $5 to me seems a bit low. Maybe I'll tell you now. There's for zakat al-fitr, the zakat you pay at the end of Ramadan. There's no way you can assess that at $5. No way. There's no way. So I would argue no. The minimum is $10. I would argue, and because that was a minimum 5 years ago, that was a standard as to my knowledge in the U.S. The standard was $10 5 years ago. So this is amazing. Like we've got all these people in these different situations, and the Quran has put in these recourses that you've got to like free a slave, or you've got to feed all these people, right? So where are the soup kitchens? Where are soup kitchens? Where are our organisms? I'm sorry, I'm getting on a different subject. So, but that's, this is stuff we have to do. If we don't have a means of doing this stuff, then that means as a community, right? We have problems. We're in sin, to be honest with you. Every masjid should have some type of program where people can give money and feed the poor, especially even if it's just for Ramadan. Forget the people that want to do it for community service. Yes, sister. No. It has to be a poor person from the community. So you have to find someone, or you have to give your money to somebody who will find someone. Zakat, for example, the system of zakat, just let me mention this real quick. In Islam, in the Quran it mentions a zakat worker. The zakat worker's job is to go out and find poor people, and the zakat worker is paid a commission based upon how many people they find to give zakat to. So the more people they find that are deserving of zakat, the more money the zakat worker makes. Right? So, anyway, go ahead. So for all social workers, that would be nice. To give a commission based upon how many cases we got. That would be nice. Yeah. Yes? You can give money overseas. Yes, you can. Sure. Poor is poor. It's a global. Yes, sister and brother.
So could someone feed the 60 people who were working at a soup kitchen?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So people that come in for that soup kitchen, for example, you can sponsor the food for that day.
But what if, let's say it's a student or just somebody who couldn't afford to do that? Could they?
Students fall into that category of being poor in Islam.
Okay, well, but even, it just seems like a large amount of money to spend, like $10, 2 meals a day.
Right.
But so what if the person decided that they wanted to volunteer at a soup kitchen for 60 days? Does that count at all?
No. This is, I understand your question. But the idea is you have to, let me explain why no. I don't want to just tell you no without the understanding why. You have to provide the food from your own self. If you volunteer, somebody else is providing. Okay? So remember, you're atoning for fasting. And when you're fasting, you're withholding food and drink and nourishment from your own self so that you can sort of think about those people in that position. Right? And so that would normally motivate a person to sympathize with them, or at least empathize with them, and want better for those people who don't have the luxury. Okay? So to atone for a mistake, you have to still be into that mode. If you just sort of go and volunteer, that's nice, but it's not considered the same level of giving as you actually providing the food from your own, sweat and energy.
So the person could cook the food?
Yes.
themselves?
Yes, absolutely.
Do
Buy
you
the
have-
food and cook the food and serve it. Absolutely.
Right, so you don't have to come up with, okay, this is the budget I'm spending,
No,
X amount.
no, not at all. You can invite one person to your house for 60 times. And just cook for that person for 60 times. It doesn't have to be consecutive days either. It could just be once a week for, what's that, 5 years? I mean, we're going to have guests for a while. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because we've got it. So let me just hold questions and let's wrap this up really quickly. No, it's not my slide. So what does Ramadan mean to you? So go ahead. So we've run out of time, so I have to cut it short. But if you have extra questions, I'm here, inshallah, afterwards. So.